Hello there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet my easy breezy granny stripe stitch blanket, a beautiful beginner-friendly project featuring a simple border. This cozy blanket works up quickly using the granny stripe stitch, making it perfect for relaxing crochet sessions or gifting to a loved one. I'll guide you through this blanket step by step from foundation row to the finishing touches, so that way you can create a blanket you'll be proud of. If you want more sizing options, you can find the ad-supported free version of the written pattern over on my blog, theloopyland.com, and I've linked to it in the description box below, where I've provided the instructions to make this blanket in 14 different sizes. In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make the medium throw size. To follow along with today's tutorial, you'll need the following materials. You'll need a 6mm or J crochet hook, approximately 1,092 yards or 2 skeins of this Karen Jumbo Ombre yarn from Yarnspirations. You can use whatever color you prefer, and I used the color sepia for my blanket. You'll need a couple of stitch markers here and a tapestry needle. If you love free crochet tutorials, make sure that you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a video. And tell me in the comments, what colors are you going to be using to make your easy breezy granny stripe blanket? So let's grab our hook and yarn and let's get started crocheting our blanket. So the finished size of the medium throw size blanket is 30 inches wide by 39 inches long, and that includes the border. And again, you can find instructions for 14 different sizes over on my blog, theloopylamb.com. And if you're wanting to match gauge in order to ensure that your blanket turns out to be the size that is expected, then the gauge for this pattern is 4 double crochet clusters by 8 rows equals 4 inches. Right, and you can find more information about the gauge and a gauge swatch information written out for you over on the blog in the pattern post. To start our blanket, we're going to create a chain of 86. I'm going to be making a miniature version of the blanket, so I'm going to have a smaller piece. But to start, we're going to create a chain of 86. If you'd like to adjust the pattern size to work with a different yarn, you can create a chain in a multiple of 3 plus 2. All right, so we're going to create our chain now. We're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. There's 1. Yarn over and pull through the loop. There's 2. And we're going to continue to yarn over and pull through the loop until we have 86 chains for the medium throw, or until you have your desired size. So once you have your chain of 86, we're ready to start with row 1. And for row 1, we're going to work 1 single crochet into each chain across, starting in the second chain from the hook. So that means we're going to skip this first chain here. The yarn on your hook never counts as a chain. We're going to count over 1 and 2. And I'm putting my thumb right next to that second chain so I know where to insert my hook. I'm going to insert my hook into that second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. And that's your first single crochet completed. So we're going to do that into the next chain. Insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And that's your next single crochet completed. And you're going to work 1 single crochet into each remaining chain across. So if you'd like to pause your video and meet me back here after you've worked 1 single crochet into each of your chains, I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you how we're moving into row 2. So I just finished my last stitch of row 1. At the end of row 1, you should have 85 stitches if you're following the instructions for the medium throw. So you should have 1 less stitch than you had foundation chains. So if you created a chain of 20, you should have 19 stitches. Okay, so now we're ready to move into row 2. For row 2, we're going to start by creating a chain of 3. We're going to yarn over, pull through, there's 1, yarn over and pull through, there's 2, yarn over and pull through, that's 3, and then we're going to turn our work. In this pattern, chain 3 turning chains count as a stitch. And I recommend grabbing a stitch marker and placing a stitch marker in the top of your turning chain or your third chain there, which will help you find that turning chain and to know where to work your last stitch in the next row. So now we're going to work a double crochet into this first stitch. So you're going to yarn over and insert your hook under both loops of that first stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops. And that's your double crochet completed. And now we're going to skip 2 stitches and we're going to work into this 3rd stitch here. So I'm going to place my fingers right next to that 3rd stitch, and then we're going to work what's called a DC cluster, or sometimes called a granny cluster, and that is 3 double crochets worked into the same stitch. So we're going to yarn over hook and insert our hook into that 3rd stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And that's our first stitch completed. And we need to do that 2 more times. So yarn over and insert into the same stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And one last time, yarn over, insert into the same stitch. Pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. And yarn over and pull through 2. And that's your DC cluster or granny cluster completed. So now we're going to repeat this across. We're going to skip 2 stitches and work a DC cluster into the 3rd stitch. So again, skipping 2, 1, 2, and into that 3rd stitch, we're going to work another cluster. So double crochet 3 times into the same stitch. So there's 1, back into the same stitch. There's 2, and one last time into the same stitch. And there's 3. And this is what your piece should look like at this point. You start to see those really recognizable granny stitches or granny clusters. And so we're going to repeat this pattern of skip 2 stitches followed by a DC cluster in the next stitch. And we're going to repeat that all the way across our piece until 3 stitches remain. So if you'd like to pause your video and repeat that pattern of skip 2 stitches followed by a DC cluster, and meet me back here when you have 3 stitches left to be worked. I'll meet you back here in just a moment. All right, so we have 3 stitches left to be worked. You can count them 1, 2, 3, and we're ready to finish off our row. To finish off row 2, we're going to work 2 double crochets into that last stitch. So we're going to skip those 2 stitches and then work 2 double crochets into the last stitch here. So there's 1 and back into the same stitch. And there's 2. And so at the end of our row, this is what it should look like. Yours will be much larger than mine, but you should start the row with your turning chain and a double crochet, then your cluster stitches across, and then end with 2 double crochets because we want to mirror the end with our beginning. All right, now at the end of row 2 for your blanket, you should have 27 of these clusters because instead of counting stitches, it's faster to count the clusters. So you should have 27 clusters and 4 double crochets. So 2 on this end and 2 on this end. All right, so now we're moving into row 3. To start row 3, we're going to do another chain 3 and turn. So we're going to yarn over and pull through until we have 3 chains. So there's 3 chains, and then we're going to turn our work. So row 3, we're going to start by working a DC cluster, and we're working that between the stitches. So we're not working into the tops of our stitches here. We're going to identify the space between these 2 double crochets and our first full cluster, and that's right here. So we're going to work a DC cluster into that space. So yarn over, insert into the space, and out the other side. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And you can see how that opens up that space a little bit more. And we've got one of our 3 stitches done. We need to go back into that space 2 more times to complete our cluster. So yarn over, back into the space, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And one last time to complete our cluster. And there we go. So that's our first granny cluster, or DC cluster, completed. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to skip the first cluster and then work a DC cluster into the next space. So again, skip this and then into the next space between the next two, where my finger is here, we're going to work another DC cluster, which again is those 3 double crochets worked into the same stitch or space. All right, and there we go. We've got our second cluster completed, and we're just going to work this pattern, or this repeat, across our piece. We're going to skip a cluster and work a DC cluster in between the 2 clusters, or into the space between them. So again, skip and then 3 double crochets. We're going to repeat this across our piece until we have 1 cluster and these 2 stitches remaining. If you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you how we're going to finish off this row. All right, so I'm at the end of my row here, and I have just this last space and these 2 double crochets on my end here that I need to work into. So what we're going to do to finish our row is we're going to skip this cluster, and then working into this space here, we're going to work our last full DC cluster. So again, those 3 stitches worked into the same space. And then what we're going to do is we're going to work our last stitch, which is a double crochet, into the top of this turning chain. And so we've got our stitch marker here, and that shows me exactly where I need to work my last stitch. And I can see when I pull my stitch marker, there's that little space here. That's where I'm going to work my stitch. So I'm going to move this stitch marker out of the way, and then I'm going to double crochet into the top of that chain 3 turning chain. So insert into the top there and double crochet 1 time. And so I'm going to lay this flat here so you can see what your piece should look like at the end of row 3. So you can see how working into those clusters into the spaces really opened up the space in between the clusters in row 2 here. And they're not as noticeable here in row 3, but they will start to open up the more stitches that you add. And now, if you have to put your project down, I do recommend taking a look, if you're unsure of what row you're on, that if you start your piece with a 1 turning chain on its own, then you should be ending on a double crochet. There should be 1 double crochet on each end. If you start your row with 2, then you should be ending your row with 2. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to row 4. For row 4, we're just going to chain up 3 again and turn our work. So for row 4, we're going to start by working a double crochet in the top of our first stitch. And again, if you find it helpful, grab a stitch marker and place it in the top of your chain 3 turning chain. And so now we're going to skip the first cluster, and we're going to work a DC cluster in between the next 2 in this space here. So we're going to skip the cluster and work 3 double crochet into the next space. There's 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to continue this pattern. We're going to skip the next cluster and work 3 double crochets in between the next 2 clusters. We're going to repeat this across the row. We're going to continue to work this pattern across our row until we have 1 stitch left to be worked. And there should be 1 stitch and 1 cluster. So if you'd like to continue to work your clusters into each space across, I'll meet you back here when we get to the end of the row where we have 1 cluster and 1 double crochet left, and I'll show you how we're going to finish off row 4. So I'm at the end of row 4 here. I have 1 cluster left and 1 last double crochet, which is my chain 3. Your chain 3s always count as a double crochet stitch in this pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip this last cluster and we're going to work 2 double crochets into the top of that turning chain. So into the top of your chain 3 and double crochet twice. So there's 1, back into the same stitch, and there's 2. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to repeat rows 3 and 4 until your piece reaches the desired size. For the medium throw instructions, we're going to repeat rows 3 and 4 for rows 5 through 74. So if you'd like to pause your video and work rows 5 through 74, repeating rows 3 and 4, I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you how we're going to do row 75. All right, so I'm back and I have another sample here. This is just a little mini blanket I'm making for my daughter's toys, and it follows the same instructions for the mini blanket or the medium throw blanket for the granny stripe blanket. And once you've gotten to row 74, we'll do something different for row 75 to finish off the top of our blanket. And so if you're following any of the other sizes or you've kind of done your own sizing, then what you do is you work your repeats rows 3 and 4 until you end on an even numbered row, right? Because you need this last row to be an odd numbered row. So I finished my last even numbered row, and then I'm going to yarn over and chain 1 and turn my work. So the right side of your fabric should be facing you. And what we're going to do is we're going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops to finish your single crochet. Now in this next stitch, when you're working into these stitches that are directly before the next cluster, I like to work my stitch into the actual stitch. Again, it's a single crochet, but if you find that you don't like that loop there, what you can do is you can work around the stitch. So it looks similar to the granny clusters in the previous rows. So in that case, you would work into the space and single crochet, right? And then you'll just work 1 single crochet into each stitch across. And again, this last stitch in the cluster is right before the next cluster, so I'm going to go into this space and single crochet. Right? That's up to personal preference. It doesn't matter. It's just a super minor change in how it looks, so it's totally up to you. So if you'd like to pause your video and work 1 single crochet into each stitch across, I'll meet you back here at the end of the row to show you how we're going to continue on to add a simple border to our granny stripe blanket if you would like to add one. All right, so I finished my row 75, which is that single crochet all the way across the top of my piece. And now I'm ready to add my border. Don't forget, if you haven't already, to add that last single crochet into the top of your chain 3 turning chain from the previous row. So now to add our border, what we're going to do is we're going to work 2 more single crochets into that last stitch, and this is going to act as our corner. So I've already got 1 single crochet, and I'm going to go back into the top of that chain 2 more times to add 2 more single crochets. So there's 1 and there's 2. And now to follow the natural curving of my work, I'm going to turn my piece so I'm working down the side of my blanket, and then I'm going to work 2 single crochets over each of the double crochets or the turning chains along the side of my piece. So here I can see where there's a space between my turning chain and the next stitch. So I'm going to work into that space and single crochet. And I'm going to go back into that space and single crochet a second time. And I'm going to continue this down the side of my blanket. So again, my next stitch here is an actual double crochet, so I'm going to work around the double crochet and single crochet twice. Okay. And I'm just going to continue that along the side of my blanket and I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you what we're going to do when we get to the corner. So I've worked down the side of my blanket here, and I'm down to my foundation row. When I get to my foundation row, because it's single crochet, I only work one single crochet into the side of that stitch. And now I'm ready to create my next corner. So working it back into that stitch, if you can get into that bottom loop here, you can do that as you can do in that stitch as well. But I'm going to work around it and work 2 more single crochets into that space to create my corner, because every time we get to a corner, we're going to create 3 single crochets into that same spot. So now I'm going to turn my piece so I have the foundation chain facing me, and you should have at least one of these loops hanging out here that we can work into. So we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of these foundation chain loops across the bottom of our work. I like to pick up the tail from my foundation chain and work over that as well, so that way I don't have to weave it in, but it is obviously much more secure if you weave in your ends on its own separately rather than crocheting over them. So I'm just going to continue to single crochet across the bottom of my blanket. So if you'd like to pause and meet me back here when you get to the next corner, I'll show you what we're doing at the next corner. So I'm at the last stitch at the bottom of my blanket here, and I'm working 3 single crochets into that last stitch to create my next corner. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to turn my work and work up the opposite side of my blanket. And because we've got double crochets and chain 3s here, we're going to work 2 double crochets around each chain 3 or double crochet. So if you'd like to pause your video, meet me back here after you finish this side of the blanket. I'll show you how we're going to finish off. All right, so I finished my other side of the blanket. I'm back up at the last row of my blanket, and because I have 2 rows of single crochet at the bottom, I want to match this top. So I'm going to work 3 double crochets into that very first single crochet of the row here to create my next corner. And then we're going to single crochet across the piece. And we want to stop right here at our corner stitch. So if you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you back here in just a moment. All right, so I just finished my last single crochet along the top of my blanket. I have worked into the first single crochet of my corner, and at this point, you can finish off your blanket one of 2 different ways. You can choose to single crochet into that last stitch and then slip stitch into the first side stitch. That's one of the ways you can do it. Or I personally like to take my last stitch here, cut my yarn, leaving a tail of about 6 to 8 inches, cutting it off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the yarn all the way through the last stitch of my blanket. And that's when I'm going to grab my tapestry needle. I'm going to thread that tapestry needle with my yarn tail. And then I'm going to use a technique called the invisible finish. I'm going to insert my hook through I'm going to skip a stitch and insert my needle here through the next stitch from front to back, pull the yarn tail through, and then I'm going to take my needle and take it through the very last stitch up through the top and pick up the back loop only and pull that yarn through. And this replicates that stitch here while giving it a nice finish without the unsightly slip stitch. And that's called the invisible finish. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel. If you like free crochet patterns, check out my blog, theloopylamb.com. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to help you in any way that I can. Thanks so much for watching. Happy crocheting, and I'll see you next time.